Sometimes the wild teaches lessons that even humans struggle to understand, because in a world where survival often means thinking only of yourself, there are rare moments when a single choice, one act of courage, one decision to stay instead of running away, can change everything. And this is the story of a small fox who stood face to face with danger, not because she was strong, not because she was fearless, but because deep inside her, she knew that leaving someone behind was something she could never live with. One quiet afternoon, as the golden sunlight slowly filtered through the tall trees and the forest echoed with the soft sounds of birds and rustling leaves, a young fox named Ember moved carefully through the undergrowth, her ears twitching at every sound, her eyes alert to every movement, because in the wild, even the smallest mistake could mean danger. And yet on that day, something unusual broke the calm rhythm of the forest, a deep and painful growl that did not belong to a predator hunting, but to a creature suffering. And as Ember slowly followed the sound, step by cautious step, her heart began to beat faster, not out of curiosity anymore, but out of something she could not explain. Hidden between thick roots and broken branches, she finally saw it, a massive mountain lion trapped in a cruel hunter's snare, its powerful body struggling against ropes that cut into its fur, its breathing heavy, its strength slowly fading. And for a long moment, Ember froze in place, because every instinct in her body screamed at her to run, to turn around, to disappear into the safety of the forest before the lion noticed her. Because this was no ordinary animal. This was a predator she had been taught to fear her entire life. And yet, as she looked into its eyes, she did not see anger, she did not see hunger. She saw pain, exhaustion, and something even more unexpected, fear. Her body trembled as she took one small step forward, then another, her mind filled with doubt and fear, wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life, wondering if helping this creature would only lead to her own end. But at the same time, there was a quiet voice inside her that refused to let her walk away, a voice that reminded her that pain is pain, no matter who feels it. And so, slowly and carefully, she approached the trapped lion, lowering herself to appear less threatening. Her movements gentle, her breathing steady until she was close enough to see the deep marks left by the ropes, and without fully understanding why, she began to act, biting into the thick fibers, pulling, tearing, stopping only when fear overwhelmed her, then starting again, over and over, as time passed and the sun slowly began to set behind the trees. The mountain lion watched her in silence, his golden eyes following every movement she made. And perhaps for the first time in his life, he chose not to act on instinct, not to strike, not to harm, but to trust, because somewhere deep within him, he understood that this small creature standing before him was not a threat, but a chance he had never expected to be given. After what felt like endless moments of effort and fear, the final strand finally snapped, and the mountain lion collapsed briefly before slowly rising to his feet, his massive presence towering over the small fox. And in that moment, everything stood still, the wind, the leaves, even Ember's breath, as she waited for what might come next. But instead of aggression, the lion simply looked at her, his voice low and steady as he asked why she would risk everything for someone like him, and Ember, after a brief moment of silence, answered softly that no creature deserves to suffer alone. And in that simple answer, something powerful was born between them: trust. In the days that followed, something unusual began to unfold within the forest, as the small fox and the mighty mountain lion, creatures that by nature should have been enemies, began moving through the wilderness side by side, not as hunter and prey, but as companions who had seen each other at their weakest, who had chosen not fear but understanding, and together they faced storms that shook the trees, hunters who returned to the forest, and dangers that neither of them could have survived alone. Yet through every challenge, their bond only grew stronger, proving that true strength is not measured by claws or size, but by loyalty, trust, and the courage to stand beside someone when it matters most. As the days slowly turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, something even deeper began to grow between Ember and the lion, whose name she would later learn was Talon, something that went beyond survival or simple gratitude. Because, in a world where every creature was taught to trust only their instincts, they had learned to trust each other instead, and that kind of trust was rare, fragile, and powerful, shaping the way they moved, the way they hunted, and even the way they rested under the quiet cover of night, knowing that for the first time, they were not alone in a world that had always been filled with uncertainty. But peace in the wild never lasts forever, and one early morning, as the forest was still covered in mist and silence, Ember's ears suddenly twitched at a sound she had not heard in a long time, the distant footsteps of humans, slow and careful, followed by the faint metallic sounds of traps being set once again. And in that moment, both she and Talon understood that danger had returned, not just for one of them, but for the entire forest that had become their home. Later that same day, as Ember moved ahead to scout the area, her focus fixed on the unfamiliar scents in the air, she failed to notice the thin wire hidden beneath the leaves, and in a sudden instant, the ground beneath her shifted, tightening around her leg as she let out a sharp cry, the same kind of pain-filled sound that she had once followed. And this time, it was Talon who heard it, Talon who ran without hesitation. Talon who saw the one creature who had once saved his life now trapped in the same cruel fate, and without thinking, he threw his strength against the trap, tearing at the earth, breaking the mechanism with force and desperation, refusing to lose the one bond that had changed him forever. As the trap finally broke and Ember was freed, she collapsed for a moment, her breathing heavy, her body trembling not only from pain but from the overwhelming realization of what had just happened. And as she looked up at Talon, she saw not just the powerful predator she had once feared, but a friend who had risked everything for her, just as she had once done for him. And in that silent exchange, no words were needed, because they both understood that what they shared was no longer just an act of kindness, but a bond built on sacrifice, trust, and something far stronger than fear. Over time, the story of the fox and the mountain lion spread quietly through the forest, carried not by actions but by change, as other animals began to notice something different, something unusual. Predators no longer hunted recklessly near certain areas. Smaller animals moved with less fear, and for the first time there was a fragile sense of balance, as if the forest itself had learned. From the unlikely friendship that had once seemed impossible, proving that even in the harshest environments, change can begin with a single choice. And on another quiet evening, much like the day everything began, Ember and Talon once again stood on the edge of a high ridge, watching as the sun slowly disappeared beyond the horizon, painting the sky with colors that seemed almost unreal. And in that moment, there was no fear, no danger, no past to worry about, only the quiet understanding that life had given them something rare, something that could never be taken for granted. And as the wind gently moved through the trees, Ember closed her eyes for a brief second, remembering the moment she almost walked away, the moment she almost chose fear instead of courage, and realizing that if she had made a different choice that day, none of this would have existed. And maybe that is what makes every choice we make so powerful. Because sometimes, one small decision can change not just your life, but someone else's world forever. So now let me ask you, if you were in her place, would you walk away? Or would you choose to stay, even if it scares you.